Hi there, my name's John Drew. I'm the founder of Mystic Store. I'm coming to you right now with a story about one of the things that's really intrigued me over the last couple of years, I would say. So it's a mystic moment. The mystic moment is kind of relating to this, which is this book kind of started me, hold it the right way up, Many Lives, Many Masters. Um, my daughter read it first. She passed it on to me. We were in Hawaii at the time, which was very nice. And I remember reading it, and my mind was blown. I just, as I've said in my previous kind of video, I'd already gone through the thing of identifying that life goes on beyond the physical into the metaphysical. So our family remains around us even when they've passed over to the other side, which is a source of comfort. Of course, you can't see them, you can't hear them. Um, you can feel them actually. Here's a funny thing. When what I find, if you meditate and you sort of think about certain people and you imagine them, and you can get, and I've seen this on, if you have a camera and it's at night time and you kind of just zoom around the room, you'll see little orbs of energy moving around. They'll be zipping around, and some pieces can be dust, so not to be mistaken for dust, but the way that the energy acts is very different. It doesn't move in a typical way that dust would move. It's way more dynamic, and it often has a little sort of translucent glow to it. Sometimes you can even see faces in them. But anyway, so I digress. But the little orbs of energy, this is ultimately when you no longer have your physical body, you have energy. You still have energy, you just pure energy without the physical body. So you no longer have the constraints of this, right? You're now able to be multidimensional. Time has no meaning, and it's an amazing thing. I can only imagine. I think I heard it once explained that death is like taking off an ill-fitting shoe, and I think that really sums it up very nicely. Not that I've can directly experience that just yet, although I will have done in the past. Um, but the whole principle is that the body actually, holds us back. But this is our soul is sits within this vessel for our life while we're here. But, at some point this wears out and it's time for us to move on. Therefore, we depart from this body, we go back into the metaphysical world, but you can still be around your loved ones. You can see them, they can't see you. You're on a different vibration level, you're on a different spectrum. So, and again, it's not that difficult to believe when you think about there's so many things that surround us that are on different frequencies that we can't see and hear because it's beyond our narrow wavelength as a physical human being. I mean, if you think about the signal that comes through to fire up your Sky TV or your satellite TV, don't you know that those radio waves, that the frequencies are firing through the atmosphere, bouncing off a satellite, coming down. We know that to be true, and we believe that. Now we can't see that happening, but there's images being cascaded around the world on satellites, and it's because it's a frequency we can't see or hear. If we could, you'd actually see the signals. But the fact is, it takes the TV as the receptor to convert it back into pictures and sound. Now, this is the point. And again, it's even with sounds. You think about a dog whistle. You hear nothing. As a human being, you hear nothing when you blow on a dog whistle. A dog hears it because they have a wider band of frequency of being able to hear. And that is something that they can hear, we can't hear. So we know there's a lot of different wavelengths of things that we don't coordinate with as human beings. So it's not that difficult to believe that when we pass on as energy within our soul, we live on as a soul and we're pure energy. And therefore we're on a higher frequency than we can actually communicate with. However, that's where the mediums come in. and various other spiritual healers who have they become bridges between the physical and the non-physical, and that's the reason they're here on the planet is they're born with that gift, and they can develop it and they can control it, learn to control it to some degree. And I'm sure many of them will have said in the past that they're not sure whether it's a blessing or a curse, because with the ability to grow up seeing dead people, and assuming that's normal, because if you can do it, why can't everybody else do it? Your assumption is that they can. I know it causes a lot of different heartaches, traumas, and all the rest of it for these people as they grow up and get used to their gift and learn. So this is, I'm digressing a little, but I'm just explaining a bit of the background. Now, the Many Lives, Many Masters book, Dr. Brian Weiss, is fascinating for many reasons. It's a fantastic true story about Dr. Brian Weiss, who was, a psychiatrist and hypnotherapist, and how he regressed a lady that ultimately he was taking her back in time to try and uncover the trauma that was causing all the problems that she had in her life from a psychological point of view, very neurotic about so many different things, and she could never settle. So he was taking her back through her earlier childhood to identify what the problems were. And then ultimately, she started talking about a completely different life. She started talking about ancient Egyptian times and giving a very vivid description of what was around her, what her name was, what her role was in the community, and where she was towards the steps of the temple. And the level of detail was astounding. Now, interestingly enough, Dr. Brian Weiss, as a scientist who, a very intelligent man, and he'd grown up with science, and he didn't want to believe in anything beyond the immediately explainable. So he kind of passed it off in a variety of ways and really refused to believe what he was even hearing for himself. And every time she came back for another session, they would go back through this, and she would go to a different era and a different lifetime. And during that, he would then regress her to the point where she was at the point of death. And she would explain who was around her or what happened that caused her death and what the transition between physical and non-physical was like, and how beautiful that moment was when she came to leave her physical body and go to a non-physical, and explain the experience and what was happening, and all about the ascended masters who were there, and the family that were there to greet her from, who had already passed on. So he refused to believe this for the longest time because he was a scientist and he was a man of science, and he only believed in things that were readily explainable. So eventually things happened which meant that he could not ignore it anymore. He had to, something happened within, and I'll let you read the book because it's well worth reading. He couldn't ignore the fact anymore. So this is where and he realized that there's a calling for him here. And part of the strength of the fact that he was so cynical and so skeptical at the outset made it more credible. He's not just like an airy-fairy kind of dude who like is a bit of a hippie and wants to believe everything, right? That's my job. He was a scientist. So, this is what makes it credible. So, since then, Brian Weiss has been taking people back through lives and teaching other hypnotherapists how to do this. And it can be enormously healing, as it was indeed for the lady in the book. Because what she discovered is that a lot of her neuroses were based on previous lives, things that had happened to her, which were manifesting into this existence. But by understanding it, she could then unconsciously release it. So all these psychological traumas that she was struggling with, one by one, as she went through the lives, it would just disappear. So in itself, it was fascinating, and it was a very healing journey. So past lives interests me. I don't think I've ever been successful. I've never really tried the past life regression thing. I've tried self-hypnosis because there's plenty of things online, YouTube and the right likes, which you can kind of go through self-hypnosis to take yourself back. And it can be enormously powerful. But it all depends, I think, on how susceptible you are to hypnosis. My partner, she is very, very good at going under with hypnosis. And it works for her. We tried it. And she will disappear off to far off lands, and she'll come back with a very vivid description of what was going on. And interestingly, that you have soul connections with the family around you who you've probably been back with them time and time again, but you play different roles in your lives. So in one instance, your son might have been your husband in a previous life, or even your wife, because you come back as a man or a woman. You come back to learn life lessons. You set yourself some intentions of life lessons when you're on the other side. You come back. Now, of course, you forget everything when you're born, right? That's part of the deal, is that you have to forget all that. You then get conditioned by your environment. You get conditioned by your education, all that sort of stuff. Your family obviously have a huge influence. The fact, everything you get you brought up around helps to shape your view of the world. Depending where in the world you actually grow up, your view of life will be completely different. And this is one of the things that I've learned over the years, and it actually was quite useful in my decades of working in the finance industry and working overseas and working with international companies. And what you learn is that everybody's version of reality in this physical existence differs. Everybody's version. So culturally, we can have a lot of similarities. So people within the UK tend to gravitate towards a certain belief system. People in America, it's different. I've been there. I was there for 12 years. People in Asia, it's a very, very different way of thinking about life. And the same thing is wherever you go, there are cultural norms. And it even breaks down more than that. Even within individual countries, you get to individual cities, and culturally, they're very different from other cities. And then regionally within the city, they can be different. Now, those regionalities and everything are breaking down over time, because as we've traveled a lot more, as transportation and the ability to move around has ever increased, then those clearly defined barriers have been somewhat eroded, but they still exist. So the bottom line is, when you think about life, you've got to keep your mind open. That's what I've learned. Learn that your version of reality is a version of reality, not the version. And that's a powerful thing, because that frees you up. It makes you realize, it opens your mind, it broadens your horizons, and listen to what other people are saying. Listen to how other versions of life exist. And don't automatically assume they're wrong just because they differ from your own. Don't be tempted to be small-minded. Don't be tempted to be judgmental. Keep your heart open, keep your mind open, and you learn. You learn about what other people's values are. You may not agree with them. You don't have to agree with them. It's interesting to understand what other people believe to be true relative to your own version of the truth. It's a great way to learn. It's a great way to grow. Keep your mind open. And that's why when I'd say things like this is one of the things that's well worth reading. So Brian Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters, I would say give it a go. See what you think. So anyway, I got to go. I can hear a phone call coming through. So anyway, this is John Drew, Mystic Store, saying farewell for now. I'll be back again soon. Love and light.